Look, I get the nuance, but October 7th, that was barbaric. It's the worst thing I've seen in my lifetime. How do you come back from that?
I agree it was horrific, but calling it the worst thing ever without context, it flattens everything. What about the 77 years of occupation, siege, and displacement that Palestinians have lived through every single day?
History doesn't start on the day we find most appalling. If we're going to honor international law and human dignity, we have to recognize the whole picture. The right to resist occupation is enshrined in international law, not the right to target civilians, but the right to resist.
But doesn't that blur the lines? How do we stay on moral ground?
By not dehumanizing. If we say one day of violence is worse than decades of systemic oppression, we are telling Palestinians their lives and their suffering matter less. That's not moral clarity, that's moral hierarchy.
The only way forward is to condemn the killing of all civilians, Israeli or Palestinian, and reckon with the structures that perpetuate violence. Occupation isn't peace, and peace doesn't come from one-sided outrage.
All right, maybe I need to zoom out. Pain doesn't erase pain, I get that.
Exactly, empathy can coexist with truth. That's where the real change begins.
All right, maybe I need to zoom out. Pain doesn't erase pain, I get that.
Exactly, empathy can coexist with truth. That's where the real change begins.
It's not just a comparison, it's a warning. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, even Israel's own group B'Tselem have called Israel's system one of apartheid. Separate laws, separate roads, restricted movement, a different legal system depending on your ethnicity.
Mandela spent 27 years in prison, not for hatting his oppressors, but for resisting a system that told his people they were less than human. The world eventually saw it for what it was. I fear we're making the same mistake with Palestine, only this time we're slower to admit it.
But South Africa wasn't under rocket fire. This feels messier.
It is messy, but occupation always is. Mandela himself said South Africans wouldn't be free until Palestinians were. He saw the parallel because he lived it.
And let's not forget, resistance movements are never neat. But if we waited for oppressed people to resist politely, apartheid would still be standing.
So you're saying the world only honors resistance after it wins?
Too often, yes. We praise Mandela now, but we condemned him then. We can't keep waiting to recognize justice until it's no longer controversial.
History watches how we talk about freedom, especially when it's inconvenient. And one day, we'll be asked where we stood.
You know what's strange? A few years ago, you couldn't even talk about Palestine in public spaces without being shut down. Now, young people all over the world are standing up. It's like something's shifted.
It has, we're seeing a moral awakening, and it feels different this time. People aren't just reacting to a moment. They're committing to a movement, one that sees Palestinian freedom as part of global justice.
I've seen change before, civil rights, anti-apartheid, Vietnam, but this one feels irreversible. It's no longer just about sympathy, it's about solidarity, and that takes perseverance, the kind of stamina that lasts longer than a news cycle.
It's about connecting the dots, right? The billions America sends to prop up this conflict, funding weapons, buying silence from Egypt and Jordan, that's taxpayer money, while folks back home can't afford insulin or see a doctor.
Exactly. Justice for Palestinians isn't just a foreign policy issue, it's a domestic one. Every dollar used to entrench occupation could be used to heal at home. Schools, healthcare, housing, that's the real security.
What kind of country do we want to be? One that funds perpetual war, or one that lives by the values it preaches: freedom, dignity, equality? If we keep turning a blind eye to injustice abroad, we poison our own democracy.
So we keep pushing. Protests, conversations, policy pressure. No shortcuts. We stay loud, we stay human, and we stay the course.
That's how all justice movements win, not with one march, but with millions of small, stubborn acts of hope.
It's not just about Palestine. It's about who we are. What we fund reveals what we value. And it's time we value peace more than power. Anyway, gentlemen, Isha prayer is at 10 p.m. I will see you there, inshallah. I need to go and work on my sci-fi novel, The Galactic Book of Doomed Civilizations. Chapter 58, Salahuddin and the Myth of the Single Save Button. In the outer spiral of the sixth quadrant, just 3 parsecs past the bureaucratic hellhole known as Vogon Sector 9, there exists a peculiar field of xenohistory dedicated solely to the study of planets that keep forgetting how they succeeded. Naturally, Earth comes up a lot. And within Earth's vast catalogue of civilizational bloopers, one of the more curious case studies is Salahuddin Ayyubi, a legendary leader so revered by Muslim earthlings that you'd be forgiven for thinking he liberated Jerusalem using only charisma and a moderately enchanted horse. The reality, as the manual clarifies, was somewhat more communal. The problem with Earth, solo mode. Galactic scholars have long observed a strange human defect known as monohero syndrome, the irrational belief that all great achievements are due to one person, usually male, preferably brooding, ideally with a sword and tragic backstory. The manual notes, monohero syndrome affects 73% of species, entering late-stage nationalism, and 100% of all Earth film directors. Muslim earthlings, while often resistant to cheesy Hollywood narratives, still appear afflicted, particularly in the way they speak of Salahuddin, or, as they refer to him in oral tradition and overpriced wall art, Salahuddin the Just, the Noble, the one who will return inshallah after Maghrib. Salahuddin, general, diplomat, decent with a catapult. To be clear, Salahuddin was brilliant. He was like if you combined the strategic mind of a Jovian fleet admiral, the moral restraint of a Zarnaxian monk, and the dental hygiene of someone who drank pre-industrial water. He was a tactician who unified rival factions without mandatory singing montages. A man who treated prisoners of war better than most galactic hotels treat guests. A statesman who preferred treaties to tantrums and still won battles without needing a Marvel origin story. But Salahuddin didn't liberate Jerusalem by himself. No more than a spaceship wins a battle without engineers, technicians, navigators, and someone who actually remembers to refuel the plasma core. The hidden galactic truth, he had help. Behind every legendary leader is a support class, and no one gets statues. Salahuddin had viziers who whispered policy while dodging arrows, imams who calibrated ethics when rage was more profitable, mothers who raised sons with spines of steel and tea tolerance, scribes, cooks, blacksmiths, and scouts whose names are absent from Earth's top trending hashtags, scholars who held him accountable with Quranic verses when ego tried to sneak in the back door, and most crucially, an ummah, a community that sacrificed not for personal glory, but for the shared weight of justice. They were the wheels, gears, and engine. Salahuddin was the figurehead. Enter the galactic historians. Centuries later, a curious species known as the Tharnaxi historiographers, large, floating brains powered by existential dread and coffee, catalogued Earth's Salahuddin obsession and concluded, these humans appear to desire not leadership, but saviorship. They await a return of a perfect individual, forgetting that such figures only emerge when entire populations are ready to carry them. One Tharnaxi even added, you don't get Salahuddin by scrolling Instagram and arguing over carpet colors at Friday prayers. He was later banned from Earth Twitter. The manual's final word. In its revised Earth appendix, shelved between Why Late Capitalism Imploded and an illustrated guide to tea in revolutions, the manual says, the next Salahuddin is unlikely to arrive via UFO or messianic prophecy. He will, if he comes at all, emerge from a people who build schools, feed strangers, argue with purpose, and remember that empires fall when communities forget how to work together. Or, put more simply, stop waiting for the hero. Start being the reason he ever had a chance. Bonus entry, Salahuddin class leadership protocols. According to interstellar leadership metrics, Salahuddin-style leaders require 1. 12.4 million units of public trust. 2. 2.3 billion collective acts of service. 3. At least one functioning sense of history. 4. And preferably, no one trying to monetize his legacy via limited edition NFTs.